you're saying, Brian, that's all well and good, but how do I get this into my application? In order to do that, we actually need to go into our settings and make sure we've got our API set up to be read. You can head on over to the project settings. And we already have this in this project. However, we can head to the API access and see what it would take to pull that open. You can see here that we already have multiple APIs. We have a high performance content API. That's where you're going to do your read and write functions on the content. We have the asset upload API and the management API. Management API is how you deal with your schema. Asset upload is for uploading assets to the system. But then we want to make sure that our API is actually ready to be read. In this case, we have a public API that we could actually turn on. By default, it starts as being off, and then you need to add some permissions. However, for the most part, what you want your permissions to be is to read all your models for all locales. That's going to give you the most access. But maybe you need to shut down some access to various elements. So maybe the public API only has some elements able to be read. So here's the all read permissions, but instead, let's say we want to read locales and stages, but just for blog posts, and we can actually give a condition where anything that is added as a where clause in our API playground or in the API can actually be used as a condition here. So you could even say, I want this API to only have permission to read one specific blog post. So you could definitely do that. We could add that in. So specifically, we could turn off all models and we could just have the read for the blog post model or a specific article as well. For the most part, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the public API, but it does make sense to set individual permissions elsewhere. By default, the public content API is going to be able to be read without a token, but you can also add tokens. You can see down here we have a token that's meant to read the draft content. This would be how you would do previews in something like Next.js. You can see it creates a value. There's a name for it for looking at later. And then that same permissions area is available here as well. This is also for where you would do write permissions. So if we want to add a separate create or write or update permission, we could actually say that this key has the create permission on the locales for, let's say, the blog post. You could create a blog post via your front end in some way, or if you want to add reviews or any sort of user generated content, this would be where you would set that and then put your API key into an environment variable and be ready to do those mutations there.